all Microsoft operating systems have to be activated. The purpose of this is to ensure that you have the proper licenses for the operating system. This would apply to client operating systems. So if you have Windows 10, Windows 11, all these operating systems you have to activate. Same is true of your server operating systems. We have several methods to activate. One is to manually activate using a product key. This would be something you may be familiar with in your home environment. If you were to go to your local computer store or electronics store and you purchase a new copy of Windows 11, it comes with a product key. So when you install the operating system on your computer, you have to type in a product key and you activate it. That's what manual activation would be. So that is a valid method for Windows Server. You purchase it, they tell you this is your product key. After you install, you enter the product key and you just activate the operating system. So that's an option, but normally not something we would do unless we are in a smaller environment. Typically, we will rely on one of these automatic activation options. The first is Key Management Service, or KMS, is what it's commonly referred to as. Now, this is very common. The way it works, you have a server that functions as a KMS host. On this server, you have installed volume activation services. What that did is activate this server as a KMS host, which gives it the ability to activate other clients, other servers in your environment. So Microsoft, somewhere out on the internet, is the Microsoft activation site. So that's out on the internet. When you configure this volume activation services, it's going to ask you to type in a KMS host key, which is a 48-digit key that you've acquired from Microsoft when you want to configure your KMS host. You enter that key, and all this server does is actually connect back to Microsoft, and it activates the server itself as a KMS host. So now you have the ability to activate other clients and servers. What happens now? In your environment, you will always have a DNS server, the domain naming service. This is something we have an entire module dedicated to later on. But DNS, in the most basic sense, it takes a name and resolves the name to an IP address. So if you were to go to the website google.com, you type in google.com, that name has to be resolved to an IP address. That is the function of DNS. Take a name that you know, whether it's for a computer in your company, you want to connect to a file server, web server in your company, or something on the internet, one of its functions, resolve that name to an IP address. When you activate the KMS host, it automatically creates this SRV, stands for service, but this service record in your DNS. What happens now? All Microsoft clients are built to automatically query their DNS server that they're set to use to see if there is a KMS host available. So they are pre-programmed that way. So now, whether I'm on my Windows 10 machine or on server 2022, your new server, you install the operating system, it's going to automatically try to activate itself. It's going to query DNS saying, is there a KMS host on the network? DNS says it is, and DNS will direct you to the KMS host, and you automatically activate. Now, one of the beautiful things about this is you don't know anything about it. You just install the operating system, it just works. I don't have to click anything. It'll just automatically do that as soon as the operating system is installed. Same is true of your client. I don't have to activate it as an IT person or try to have users do it. It's going to be automatic. One fact about KMS, the activation is only valid for a maximum of 180 days. So let's say you have a computer, you activate it, and then you take it off the network. It has not been back on the network in 180 days. It will automatically move itself to a deactivated state, and it's going to shut down every hour. You can still use it, but it's going to shut down every hour and keep giving you these messages saying that the operating system needs to be reactivated. It attempts to reactivate every 7 days. Now, the reason I say that, if you were to go to Google or Microsoft and read anything about KMS, one of the first things you'll see is this 180 days. That's usually all they say about it. The downside that some people I draw from that is I deploy 100 new computers on my network today. Well, they all have to activate. I don't want these 100 computers to automatically come back at exactly the same time every 180 days and just create a bottleneck. So what happens is they come back every 7 days. So all your clients, all your servers attempt to reactivate every 7 days. Now, if you are on vacation for 14 days, no big deal. You just don't reactivate during that time. When you come back to the network, power up your computer, it'll then reactivate. So every 7 days, it attempts to reactivate. If somehow, after trying this for every week, you get to 180 days and you've not reactivated, then you will deactivate. So that's unique to KMS. An option very similar to KMS is Active Directory based activation. Now, this is somewhat newer. We had this in Server 2016 and in Server 2019, but newer than KMS. Active Directory based activation is set up on your domain controller. That's something we configure in the next lesson. But your domain controller runs this software called Active Directory Domain Services. That is where you will go to create all your user accounts. When you join computers to your domain, that's where they show up in this Active Directory Domain Services software. So let's say this machine is my domain controller. Now I'm just going to say DC for that, for domain controller. So again, all your users, your groups, your computer accounts all reside on that server. Active Directory based activation would be set up on this. So we'll say AD based activation. What happens now? Anytime you join a computer to your domain, it automatically activates. Whether that's a client or a server, does not matter. It will automatically become activated. If you stay joined to the domain, you remain activated. Now, the same service you install to make a KMS host, you install that same service, the volume activation services. You just install it on your domain controller and you choose Active Directory based activation. So that's a newer option, but they work very similar. Now that leads to the question, well, why would I choose one over the other? The primary consideration, if every device in your environment, every Windows device that you activate is going to be a member of your domain and you're going to centrally manage it, then Active Directory based activation, a great option. If you have a lot of devices in your environment and they may not be managed that way, they may run machines or have some dedicated purpose, then KMS can still work for those. So you may have one or the other, or you may have both in your environment. So this does not have to be a one-size-fits-all solution. We also have multiple activation key. This one's pretty simple. You go to Microsoft and you say, I want to buy Windows Server 2022, and I need 10 instances of this. So I'm going to install this on 10 different servers. They'll say, okay, you can use this one product key that they're going to give you. You can use this 10 times. Each time you activate it, it connects back to the Microsoft activation site here, and it just reduces your count by 1, and you activate all 10 of your servers. Once you're activated, you are activated for life. You know, unless you reinstall the operating system, you're not worried about reactivation or anything like that. Just reuse the same product key and you can activate. Now with that, you can go to the Microsoft site and you can remove an activation. So let's say this server, we are physically replacing this server. I don't know, maybe the hardware died, but I'm going to replace it with a brand new server. But I don't want to go buy a new license for that server because I'm just replacing an old one. I can simply go to the Microsoft site and you could remove one of your previous activations for that server you no longer have. Then you can activate your new server and you're not wasting any money by buying extra licenses. The last one in our list is automatic virtual machine activation. Now, this one is unique to virtualization. My server here can run this Hyper-V. Hyper-V is Microsoft's virtualization role. What it does is allows you to install Hyper-V on a server. Then on that server, you can create virtual machines and they will be full operating systems. So I could make this a file server, web server, anything you would configure on a physical server, you could configure on a virtual machine. Well, with the automatic virtual machine activation, I can put that key on the Hyper-V host itself. Now, whenever we deploy virtual machines on the host, they just automatically activate. I don't have to do anything. Just install the operating system. No, it's going to be activated. So those would be our primary options. Either you just do it manually, unlikely in a production environment. So we have KMS, Active Directory-based activation, multiple activation key, and automatic virtual machine activation. Now, some of these terms we've mentioned, like DNS, domain controller, volume activation services, don't be overly concerned with those right now if you are not familiar with those terms. They get defined in some of the upcoming lessons, but they are just relevant to some of the things that we're discussing now.